Welcome to the lecture for Basics of Biblical Hebrew, Chapter 6. In this chapter, we're going to cover the Hebrew prepositions. Now, prepositions are pretty straightforward. The prepositions in Hebrew function much like they do in English. Hebrew prepositions, like English prepositions, describe the relationship between words. And they're those small little words in the language that often crop up. Let me give you an example of some prepositions in English. I'm going to use the book and the desk, and what I want to do in order to kind of introduce you to what a preposition is. The book and the desk are going to have different relationships as I move the book around the desk, and I'm going to use prepositions to describe that relationship, all right? Right now the book is on the desk. The preposition on is describing the relationship between the book and the desk. Now the book is under the desk. The book is over the desk. The book is beside the desk. The book is behind the desk. The book is now in front of the desk. All of these words that describe the relationship between the book and the desk are prepositions. Now, sometimes prepositions are used to modify nouns, and sometimes prepositions are used to modify verbs. For now, we'll pretty much keep our discussion to those prepositions and prepositional phrases that modify nouns. When we get into the verb chapter, we'll expand our knowledge of the prepositions and how they relate to verbs. Now, another important thing to know about prepositions is that prepositions always introduce prepositional phrases, and a prepositional phrase consists of the preposition and the object of the preposition. So if I say the book is under the desk, under is the preposition, and the desk, that which follows the preposition, is the object of the preposition. Now that's just a little bit of grammar so that you understand how prepositions work in English, because prepositions work the same in Hebrew. Now there is one aspect of the Hebrew preposition that's different from the English preposition. There are three different types of Hebrew prepositions, three different types, and we're going to study and look at each of those types in this lecture. There are independent prepositions, makef prepositions, and inseparable prepositions. Let's take a look at each of those. Let's look at your screen. Independent prepositions are prepositions that simply stand alone. Now what this means is that the Hebrew preposition in this case is its own word. So on your screen you see two examples, and the words highlighted in red are the prepositions. The words that appear in black are the object of the preposition in each case. The first example reads, Lifnei Hamelech. It is translated before the king. The preposition lifnei means before, or is translated before, and its object is Hamelech, or the king. In the second example, Tachath Ha'etz, the translation is under the tree. The preposition is tachath, and it means under. The object of the preposition is ha'etz. In each case, we have a prepositional phrase. The preposition is first, and the object appears second. That's the independent preposition in Hebrew, and it is its own word. You will encounter these prepositions and learn them as vocabulary words. Let's look together at makef prepositions. Look at your screen. These particular prepositions are joined to their objects with something called a makef. The makef. The makef is a small horizontal stroke that exists between the preposition and the object. You'll see in the two examples on your screen, El HaHekal and Min Haaretz, two prepositional phrases. The prepositions and the makef are in red. Let's look at the first example together, El HaHekal. Do you see the preposition el, meaning to, followed by the object? There's a small horizontal line that exists between the preposition el and the object. That horizontal line is the makef. It has no translation significance. It simply indicates that the two words are bound and have only one accent together. They're pronounced as if it were a single word. El ha'hekal, min ha'aretz. Makef prepositions are some of the more common prepositions in Hebrew. Let's take a look at your screen together and see some of the more common makef prepositions in Hebrew. A number of them are listed for you. Al, el, ath, eth, and min. You'll see on your screen that following each preposition, that small horizontal stroke exists. That's the makef. And the reason that these prepositions are called makef prepositions is because the makef occurs with them in every instance. The third type of preposition is the inseparable preposition. Let's look on your screen together to see two examples of an inseparable preposition. On your screen, you'll see two prepositional phrases. the preposition is highlighted in red and the object of that preposition is in black. Now what you'll notice is that these prepositions are not independent words, nor are they joined to their object by a makef. They are, in this instance, prefixed to their object. Now we've seen words prefixed before. The definite article and the conjunction wow are two words prefixed to the words that follow. Inseparable prepositions are like that in that they are always prefixed to their objects. In the first example, basade, in a field, the inseparable preposition ba is prefixed to its object, field, in a field. In the second example, kamelech, the inseparable preposition ka is prefixed to its object, melech, like a king. Now there are only three inseparable prepositions in Hebrew, and they're the three most common prepositions in Hebrew. So we need to take some time and learn how these words are spelled or how they'll appear in context. You'll see on your screen now the three inseparable prepositions: the lamed preposition, the beit preposition, and the kaf preposition. You'll see, for example, that the lamed preposition occurs over 20,000 times in Hebrew, the beit preposition over 15,000 times, and the kaf preposition over 3,000 times. That distribution rate demonstrates that these prepositions occur in every chapter of every book of the Hebrew Bible. So it's very important that we learn how to identify and spell these prepositions. When it comes to the spelling of the inseparable prepositions, there are four basic spelling options I want to show you today. Let's look at your screen together. Before most consonants, the inseparable preposition is spelled simply with the vocal schwa. Look at the two examples on your screen. Basade, in a field, lana'ar, for a young man. In each case, the inseparable prepositions beit and lamed appear with the simple vocal schwa underneath the preposition. That's the most common spelling of the inseparable preposition. In our second category of spelling options, the inseparable prepositions are spelled with short vowels. Now these short vowels derive from the fact that they're prefixed to words that begin with a syllable having hatef vowels. Now you'll remember from our last chapter, the lecture on the definite article and the conjunction wow. The conjunction wow also is spelled with a short vowel when it is prefixed to a word that begins with a syllable having a hatef vowel. So in our first example, ka'anashim, like men, the inseparable preposition kaf is spelled with pathic because the syllable to which it is prefixed with begins with hatef pathic. In our second example, ba'emeth, the inseparable preposition is spelled with sagol because it's prefixed to a syllable that begins with hatef sagol. All right? Now, previously we talked about the same phenomenon with the conjunction wow, and I mentioned that this was due to the rule of schwa number 2. Now, if you need to review what the rule of schwa number 2 is, you want to look in the back of chapter 4 in Basics of Biblical Hebrew, the Advanced Information section, 4.12. In 4.12, Advanced Information, we describe for you the two rules of schwa, 1 and 2. The spelling of the inseparable preposition with a short vowel in these two examples derives from rule of schwa 2. Let's look at our third set of spelling options. In this set of spelling options, the preposition is prefixed to a syllable that begins with vocal schwa. Now, because two vocal schwas cannot stand at the beginning of a word, the spelling of the inseparable preposition cannot be the simple vocal schwa, and in this case, it will be hirik. Let me demonstrate for you how this works. Our first example is the Hebrew word nevaim, and it means prophets. When we prefix the inseparable preposition to the word prophets, nevaim, our initial response is to add vocal schwa to the spelling of the preposition. However, two vocal schwas cannot exist together at the beginning of a word, and because of that, the first vocal schwa will always change to hirik. So instead of two vocal schwas at the beginning of a word, it changes to hirik plus a silent schwa. So instead of k, nevaim, it's kinviim, kinviim. Let me show you how it works with the second example, the Hebrew noun berith, meaning covenant. We have our noun berith and we want to add to it the lamed preposition. Our initial reaction is to add the vocal schwa, the basic spelling. However, like I said, two vocal schwas cannot stand together at the beginning of a word. This is rule of schwa 1 in 4.12. So what happens in each case, the first schwa becomes a heroic and the second schwa becomes a silent schwa. So we began with two vocal schwas and we ended up with a heroic in a closed syllable. So here's how we syllabify now. Rather than having 3 syllables, we have now only 2 syllables. Live, wreath. Now another thing that happens here is because the Begad Kafat letter, bait, is now preceded by a short vowel, we have to get rid of the dogish lene in the bait. And so we end up with live, wreath, a 2-syllable noun. This is rule of schwa 1, and it simply states the fact that 2 vocal schwas at the beginning of a word will change to a heroic in a closed syllable. All right, these are the 3 first spelling options for the inseparable prepositions. The first one is with the basic vocal schwa. The second spelling option with the short vowels is derived from rule of schwa 2, and the third option with the heroic is derived from rule of schwa 1. We have one more spelling option to cover, and that is when an inseparable preposition is prefixed to a word with a definite article, the definite article consonant is going to drop out. Let's look at our slide together. With nouns that have the definite article, the vowel and the dogish forte of the definite article are retained, but the consonant of the preposition replaces the hey of the definite article. Now this is the trickiest spelling for the preposition because you lose something in the mix. What's going to happen is you're going to prefix the inseparable preposition to the definite article, and it's going to cause the hey of the definite article to fall out. It's going to cause the hey of the definite article to fall out. Let me demonstrate this for you. It's perhaps easiest to demonstrate it first, and then we'll look back at the examples. I'm going to illustrate this with the first example that appeared on your screen, the Hebrew noun saveh, meaning field. First, we're going to prefix the definite article to the word field. It will move from a field to the field. So the definite article consists of 3 parts: hey, pathic, dogish forte. Now we want to add to that construction the inseparable preposition bait. You can see here on the screen that there are now 3 words, 2 of which are prefixed to the noun saveh. There is number 1, the inseparable preposition bait, number 2, the definite article, and number 3, the noun saveh, in the field. Now here's the trick. When an inseparable preposition is prefixed to a word beginning with a definite article, the hey of the definite article disappears, and then the bait preposition is going to slide over and take the slot. So let's do that together. We're going to erase the bait preposition, and that preposition is now going to slide over and occupy the space of the definite article. Okay? So now you still have 3 component features, but they're slightly different in their orientation. You have number 1, the preposition bait, and that exists because the preposition is there. And you also have maintained the spelling of the noun. But how do you know that this word is definite? You know that this word is definite because the pathic and the dogish forte of the definite article remain. The pathic and the dogish forte of the definite article remain. So this is tricky. The bait of the preposition occupies the hey of the definite article space, but the vowel pointing of the definite article remains. So you have to understand, or you have to derive from a form like, if we go back to your slide on your screen, if we go back to your screen and we look at the example, basadeh, that which appears in red, the bait with the pathic and the dogish forte, prefixed to the noun sadeh, that threesome, the bait, the pathic, and the forte, is translated in the. The translation in comes from the bait preposition. The translation the comes from the pathic and the forte, because the pathic and the forte are the remnant of the definite article. So this is a little bit tricky because the hey has gone covert. It's now hidden. It's secret. It's gone away. But it's left the trail or the remnants, the breadcrumbs of its pointing. And so you have to see that in order to identify it. Let's look at the second example. Kamelech. Kamelech. You can see that the preposition kaf is translated as like. The translation the comes not from any consonant that you see in kamelech, but rather it comes from the pathic and the dogish forte that you see. The pathic and the dogish forte. The pathic and the dogish forte come from the spelling of the definite article, but the hey of the definite article drops out when you prefix a preposition to it. Let's look at the third example, ba'esh. Ba'esh. The preposition bait is translated as in, and then you have esh for fire. Now the translation the comes from the comets that appears under the bait. Now this one is really tricky, and we'll have to take some time to explain it. In this instance, you would expect a pathic under the preposition and a dogish forte in the first root letter of the word to which it is prefixed. But you cannot put a dogish forte in a guttural consonant, and it results in compensatory lengthening. Let me show you what I mean. We'll take the noun esh, meaning fire. And to this noun, we're going to prefix in blue the definite article, which consists of three parts: the hey, the pathic, and then the dogish forte. However, you'll recall that the guttural consonants have a force field that exists around them, and you cannot place a dogish forte in them. Because the guttural aleph rejects the dogish forte, the pathic of the definite article compensates for that loss by lengthening from the short a pathic to the long a comets. All right. Now that we studied in the definite article chapter 5. Now, because we have this situation, the hey and the comets due to compensatory lengthening, when we add the inseparable preposition, we're going to get the spelling that we would expect with the definite article. There we have the preposition prefixed to the definite article. The hey of the definite article is going to disappear. It's going to go undercover, and the bait is going to slide over. Once the bait slides over, the vocal schwa will drop out. We'll rewrite our bait in its proper place. So what you have, if I can demonstrate all of this together now, is you have the consonant of the preposition, the vowel of the definite article, and then the object of the preposition. So we're going to translate it: 1, in; 2, the; 3, fire. In the fire. Now this is perhaps the trickiest feature in this chapter, because you're going to need to translate the definite article when you fail to see the actual hey of the article. The hey has dropped out. The technical term for this is syncopation. This is called intervocalic syncopation, in fact, and that's not a term you should memorize or even think about. But if you like the technicalities, the hey drops out. Now, the fact that I tell you that is due to this reason. The hey is a weak consonant, and you're going to see it dropping out all the time. It's going to drop out at the end of a word. It's going to drop out at the beginning of a word. And so it's very important that you begin to think of this hey consonant as weak and frequently dropping out. You'll see the remnants of it in different places, and in this particular case, the remnant of the hey comes from its vowel pointing, the pathic and the forte in each case. Very good. Well, let's move on. That's the toughest thing in the chapter. But let's talk about the preposition min now. Before we move on from this chapter, there are a few special things I need to say about this particular preposition, the preposition min. The first thing you already know is that the preposition min is a makef preposition. However, this particular preposition occurs both as a makef preposition and as an inseparable preposition. This is the only preposition that does double duty in two categories: 1, a makef preposition, and 2, an inseparable preposition. Now you know from earlier in our lecture that the min preposition is a makef preposition. So on your screen you will see the example min melech, from a king, from a king. But there are other options. Let's look at the next slide on your screen. No longer do you see in example 1 min melech, but mimelech, mimelech. In this case, the preposition min has been prefixed directly to its object, but in a very special way, and I want to show you that way. Let me demonstrate it for you. We'll begin by writing the noun melech, meaning king. Now the normal spelling of the preposition min is with a makef, min melech. However, when the preposition min becomes an inseparable preposition, something special happens. The noon of the preposition min disappears and it shrinks up and it becomes a dagesh forte, and it becomes a dagesh forte in the first consonant of the noun to which it is prefixed. All right? So when you see in your example on the slide, mim melech, you will notice that in the mim of the noun melech, there is a red dagesh forte. That dagesh forte in the consonant mim of melech represents the assimilated noon of the preposition min. Meaning this, whenever you have the preposition min being prefixed to a word, the noon of the preposition will shrink up, assimilate as a dagesh forte, and appear in the first consonant of the object of the preposition in each case. Let's look at the second example. The noun bayeth. This particular noun begins with the begad kafat letter and a dagesh lene. When we prefix the preposition min to it, we want to do mim, hirik, and dagesh forte. The dagesh forte of the assimilated noon erases the dagesh lene of the begad kafat, and it appears in it. Let's look at the third example together, the noun ish, meaning man. When we prefix the preposition min as an inseparable preposition to this noun, we begin with the min, we begin with the mim consonant, the short I vowel hirik, and then we want to place a dagesh forte in the first consonant of the noun to which it's prefixed. However, in this case, the first consonant of the noun to which it is prefixed is a guttural, and so it has a force field around it. You can't put a dagesh forte in a guttural consonant. Because of that, it causes the hirik to lengthen, and in this case it lengthens from a short I to a long E, sere. So hirik has lengthened to sere. This is an example of compensatory lengthening. Now when we encounter this phenomenon with the definite article, the short A vowel lengthened to the long A vowel, pathic to comets. When you have the short I vowel hirik, it lengthens to the long E vowel sere. This is the second pattern of compensatory lengthening. The first pattern of compensatory lengthening is pathic to comets. The second pattern of compensatory lengthening is hirik to sere, short I to long E. And here you've seen it, all right? Now, let's go back to your screen and look at example 4 together. In example 4, you'll see the preposition min has been prefixed to its object haaretz, the earth. Notice, however, in this case, when the preposition min is prefixed to the definite article, it does not cause the definite article to fall out. The hay is present in each case. In the fifth example, you'll see that the preposition min is prefixed to the noun chutz, which means outside, so from outside. Now in this case, the noon of the preposition min tried to assimilate to the guttural chet, but it was rejected. In this instance, it didn't result in compensatory lengthening, but virtual doubling. Let me demonstrate that for you. We'll begin with the noun chutz. We will prefix the preposition min. We could begin with the mim consonant, the hirik, And then we want to place a doggish forte in the first consonant of the root to which it is prefixed, but we can't place a doggish forte in this guttural. It's got the force field around it. Now, in this case, we don't get the lengthening of the heroic to sere. That's compensatory lengthening. We get rather what we know as virtual doubling. That is, the heroic does not lengthen to sere, rather it stays heroic. Now, in the last chapter, we also encountered virtual doubling with the definite article. The pathic remained pathic, and there was no lengthening. This is the exact same phenomenon. However, it appears with the I-class vowel, not with the A-class vowel. So let me just summarize the basic features of this chapter that are important for review. Number one, we learned that there are three basic types of prepositions in Hebrew. The inseparable preposition, they're their own word. The makef preposition, these prepositions are joined to their object with that small horizontal stroke. And then there are the three inseparable prepositions, beit, kaf, and lamed. Now, with the inseparable prepositions beit, kaf, and lamed, we took some time to learn how they're spelled because they're vocalized or spelled slightly different depending upon the type of syllable to which they're prefixed. Sometimes vocal schwa, sometimes a short vowel because of the rules of schwa, sometimes a heroic in a closed syllable, etc. We also learned that when you prefix the inseparable preposition to a definite article, the hey of the article falls out and the preposition occupies its space. We learned that that's an important feature because the dropping out of the hey occurs not only with nouns and prepositions and the definite article, but in many, many other contexts. So you want to remember that key morphological feature. The hey likes to drop out. Finally, we spent some special time on the preposition min because it occupies two categories of preposition. Both the makef category, spelled with that little horizontal stroke, but also the preposition min is prefixed directly to some of its objects. When that preposition is prefixed, the noon of the preposition assimilates as a doggish forte into its object. Now let me just highlight as the final thing here. The noon in Hebrew is also a weak letter, and the noon loves to assimilate, when possible, as a doggish forte and hide in other letters. So there are two real morphological features I want to highlight here. One, the hey drops off, and two, the noon assimilates and appears as a doggish forte. In addition to all the features of the prepositions you learn in this chapter, those two things are also important. But that's it for now. We'll see you in the next chapter.